Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I am one of your co hosts. I'm Dr. Joe Hamlett. And as always, alongside me is Dr. Dave Peltz. How you doing, sir?
Doing well, Dr. Joe. You say it so matter of factly, as always.
Well, I could say this guy never leaves. So here he is. But
That's true, I
again,
know.
all
Stalkers
joking
Anonymous.
aside, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. This is your personal, professional, and career development podcast where we want to help you along with your journey. As I always say, me and Dave are still on our own journey together, separate, and look forward to what's next. Well, if this is your first time, thanks for tuning in. And hopefully you'll gain something from this podcast. And if you're been with us for a while, thanks for coming back. And so, as always, we start off the podcast. One of us will introduce the topic, and then the other one will get us started. So, I have the pleasure of introducing our topic today. So, are you ready, Dr. Dave?
I'm ready, Dr. Joe. Hit me
All
up, man.
right.
What
So,
you what you got for me? What you got for me?
all right. So, here we go. So, today's topic is project management mindset. So, Dave, what does that mean to you? I know we've had a pimp on here several episodes ago and talked to us a little bit about project management and things like that. So, what does that mean? Project management mindset.
Yeah, and I think a couple episodes before that one, we had actually started talking about this mindset, where it's not formalized like a project management certification that's formal, and you go through a set process in the workplace or in the organization to create something or develop a project. Um, for this topic, it's a little bit different. It's taking the project management idea and incorporating it into your personal, professional, and career development life versus the organizational perspective. So we can break that down if we look at our personal lives. A project could be I'm going to install irrigation in my yard, or I'm going to
Right.
put in a pool, or I'm going to, landscape, or I'm going to, change something about the house, or the apartment, or whatever, or maybe it's a trip or a vacation, or maybe it's setting up time and identifying how to go to school or to get a formal certification or informal training for yourself. I mean, those are different projects that we can look at for our own development. It could be family oriented, it could be individualistic towards yourself. Um, but it's identifying that to-do list and identifying and prioritizing how to go about um, completing those things as a checklist and prioritizing them. From a professional development, we can say, hey, this is going to be formalized training. It is going to be formal networking. It is going to be deliberate for me to, um, meet 7 new people within the next 3 weeks
Right.
and learn about their departments and their teams. That's a professional goal or a professional project for yourself. It's nothing that's going to help you with your metrics per se. And then in the career development, it could be I'm going to get my resume updated. What does that
Right.
look like?
Yeah.
How many years back do I need to go? Have I been keeping track of things? Have I not? Do I need to go back into my repertoire of other resumes? Or do I need to hire a coach or find a coach or a mentor that can help me put together a good solid resume? Or maybe it's brushing up on your interview techniques. Or maybe it's I'm going to go out and research 3 companies that I really want to work for. Or I want to
Right.
research how to start my own business. So that's that project management mindset versus here's a list of things I'm going to do, and I'm going to procrastinate on them because I don't feel like doing it today.
Right.
It's setting, it's coming up with the mindset to say, hey, I'm going to do at least one thing today or at least 3 things today, whether it's personal, professional, or career, or you're just going to identify 2 professional, 1 career, 5 personal. Just coming up with that plan and identifying what you want to do and then breaking those things down. Research, uh, Maybe it's reservations, maybe it's setting appointments, that sort of
Okay. Well, you touched on all three areas that we, try and talk about on the podcast. So yeah, you're right. It's that process of, identifying what your objective is, whatever your goal is, and then putting together a plan to actually, make it to where you can be successful. And it may be as simple as creating the plan to get you started, and identifying whether it's personal, professional, or career. So again, I think you highlighted. If I go to the personal, which that's probably the one I spend the most time on, but that's really how I took that approach to when I went back to school. Not necessarily for my entire program, but as I look down the road so far, thinking it's going to take me forever to graduate, then I really start to hone in on, okay, so what does one class look like? And that turned into my project. And that was that mindset shift of not looking so far down the road, but let's do what's manageable in this class. And that's what I did. I sat down, like you said, a checklist of, okay, do these things this day, this week. And within that whole semester, this is what I should have accomplished, because it helped me to intentionally look at how can I achieve success in this one class versus trying to put together this um, overwhelming project of the entire program. That would have been daunting and again, be discouraging. But once I kind of identified one class at a time, then it was much easier to accomplish that. And again, you see wins along the way, which is important, which a lot of us may go through a program or process and never celebrate that. So it doesn't feel as significant, or you don't feel like you are achieving when all the time you are. So, yeah, again, so if you were going to put together a project list for, say, education or a project at home, what would that look like if you were going to use this idea of project management mindset?
thing. Joe, I like what you're saying about coming identifying and then coming up with a plan. So the first thing you're going to want to do is probably identify what is it you want to do,
Right,
right? I want to, let's take it just one class at a time. You know,
right,
here's my class. How do I break that down? You break it down into the individual assignments.
yep,
And then what's the next step in that plan? Maybe it's the sub objectives.
yep,
You've got 5 assignments. What does each one of those assignments entail? And then just go about checking off those little pieces. You don't have to get into the minutia. In project management theory, we don't get down into the micromanagement aspect, but it's more than just having one word up there, school.
right,
It's the
yep,
class, it's the number of assignments. What do those assignments entail? So you can check off, I've researched this, I've got a draft of this, I've got an
yep,
outline, I've got a final draft, I've got a review, and that's much more manageable. To your point, those wins or those milestones or those inch stones, you have to celebrate them. That's what's going to keep you motivated versus just having
yep,
one word up there, complete this class this semester.
right,
It's like, well, what does that look like? It's, you're doing a renovation of a room in your house. If you're going to strip it down to the, redo the floors and baseboards and paint, I'm going to redo that room. Well, that's very broad.
right,
What
right,
does it look like? Well, I need to move the baseboards. I need to remove the flooring. I need to clean the surfaces and start checking those things off. Install the flooring. What does that entail? Well, there's a couple of sub processes to that. So identifying those so you understand what you're looking forward to and making sure you don't miss anything.
right,
Did I forget the cleanup phase? Oh, I forgot to do that. Now I've got 12
right.
screws underneath the flooring. Now I got to rip up the flooring.
Well, I think that's a very, very important piece of that. I don't know that you said it specifically, but writing those things down, so that you can actually have a physical check off. And so some of the things you didn't mention, which we may think as obvious, but not really. What tools do you need? What
Mm-hmm.
materials do you need? So
Exactly.
those types of things can help you having it written down, being able to say, "Oh, I've got the screws I need. I've got the glue I need. I've got the baseboard, the new baseboard. So just having all that in place, so you don't. I know we all think we could probably manage a lot of things in our head, but oftentimes you'll find yourself running back and forth to, our Home Depots or Lowe's to pick up those additional items that we forgot. So having that, at least a starting point, because there's still, even if you write all this stuff down, you're still going to be like, oh man, I forgot that. So it just gives you that visual of, okay, so these are the steps, these are the materials I need, this is, like you said, the cleanup afterwards, all those things are on that checklist. And like I say, you're still probably going to come up with, oh wow, I forgot to add this, and that might be at the very bottom of the list, like
Right.
miscellaneous, just because you want to make sure it's still visible.
Yeah, and it helps with the accountability
Yep.
aspect of it too, but also it really does solidify that project management mindset,
Right.
and building that checklist, that project checklist, or that, the milestones within that project or process that you're working on, to have that accountability. Did I do this? Did I skip a step? Did
Right.
I do a 2-for-1? Did I do cleanup as I went along so I don't have
Yep.
to do it as a separate item? That's what project management is about. It's about identifying the steps necessary to complete the goal, not necessarily all the variations, the streamlined process and those things that need to happen, and then holding yourself accountable so you're not skipping those steps,
Right.
and so you are successful with it. Same with writing a school paper, or maybe it's a training that you're taking online. That is a project in itself. You see the objectives there. You see what videos you need to watch, what assessments you need to take. That is a project in and of itself. And if you say I'm going to complete 3 of those to get a certification, that's your project. The project is to get the certification, but within there might be 5 modules, and each one of those modules has, 6 sub-modules. That's the project that you're working on for that certification.
Right. Well, I don't think the one thing that again may be obvious to people, but putting a timeline for each of those things,
Mm-hmm.
and because, or even maybe putting them in a sequence that makes sense. But I think that's also important, because if you just again have this great list of things to do, but you don't set any deadlines, then things overlap. Like we just kind of mentioned, so you got to pull the baseboards off if you're going to do that, replace the baseboards. And so we wouldn't say, well, install the baseboards over the existing baseboards. So
That
you
would be
you
a
have
that would
to,
be a nice trick. That would save a
yeah.
lot of time.
So, but again, even though it may be obvious, those are things you need to do if you really want to get into that project mindset. I mean, you really uh, bring it down to as much of the details as you can, so that you can again make sure that you're capturing everything. And so, but again, putting timelines on each of those activities. And so that you are looking at it and saying, okay, so I knocked this out. Yes, it's complete. Now I can move to the next thing, the next part of the process. Then from that one, move to the next one. So again, just want to highlight that too as well, that there should be some time associated, because you could put a project together and with no end date, and then you end up tearing down a wall in your house, and then 6 months later the wall is still tore down because you
Right.
didn't really set, you know, realistic timeline on when it should be completed. So like I said, it may seem obvious, but uh, I
No,
think
that's a
also,
great point, Joe. It really is. I mean, it kind of crosses over into SMART goals: specific,
absolutely,
measurable,
yeah,
SMA, achievable, relevant, and timely. I mean, it's
yep,
just
yep,
it's all part of that mindset, of, like you said, setting that time frame so they don't get away from you.
right,
In a project at work, in your professional environment, there's an end date.
right, yep,
It's not just open ended
yep,
typically. And the same with what you're doing with your personal life, and same with your career development. You should be putting timelines on yourself on how many events or people per X period, or per week, per month, that you're going to
right,
meet or introduce or research or communicate with or get to know better, or how many webinars are you going to attend, how many meetings are you going to attend, how many supervisors, peers, colleagues are you going to introduce yourself to, and then build on those relationships. know, that's part of your career development and networking. And you know, even if it gets into now you've been offered the job, have you negotiated the benefits and salary and flexibility that you need? Some companies
Right.
are less flexible. Some companies are more flexible. So, and if you're working for yourself, have you set up reasonable timelines for you to accomplish what you're doing? Just like with this podcast, we have deadlines that we meet. We do things in a certain way in a certain order
Right.
to make sure that this podcast happens. Same when we work with our clients. There are deadlines. How do we meet those deadlines? That's part of that project management mindset to ensure
Yep.
things do not get derailed.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on too. If we go back to the scenario where you talked about, career advancement and you're seeking a new position, a new role. Again, having those timelines, but not being so rigid on those timelines because, like you just said, you may have 10 interviews and none of them are a fit. You may say to yourself, by the time I'm 35, I want to be here. It may not be 35. It may be 38, 40 because of just the way things go. But setting a realistic timeline, but not being so rigid with your timeline that it's not flexible enough for you to adjust to make changes. Think about, before COVID, maybe a lot of people had all these ideas and goals set for themselves. And then we're shut down. The world is almost shut down for a whole year. That definitely would affect your timeline. So if you're
Yeah,
so
yeah, it
rigid,
could impact. It could have a slight impact.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So if you're thinking by, May 2020, I want to be, this, that might not have occurred during COVID. So it
Mhm.
just, again, we kind of said it, as a joke, but that's the reality of it. We don't know what types of things may interject while you're on your, with your project management mindset being laid out totally, completely. Um, but it is definitely far better to have something that you may miss a deadline than to just like me and Dave have said in the past, just kind of get in a boat and just start floating down the river and letting things happen as they do. You may look up and advance in that career, or you may stay stagnant and find out you're just in a pool that's just circling round and round. So
Right. And you said something about preparing. You know, preparing for the unexpected. When we've talked about this before in your career, what are those what if scenarios? And that's part of that project management mindset. Have you
right.
prepared for those what if
Yep.
scenarios? What if the company, you know, there's a reorganization, there's restructuring, you find yourself involuntarily let go, you
Right.
know, because there is a restructuring. Or maybe there's a new leader that comes in and says, hey, we're making all kinds of changes, whether you like it or not. You can either play the game or not play the game. Have you thought
Right.
about what that's going to look like, what that scenario looks like? That's part of that project management mindset is the foresight of looking into different possible scenarios that may interrupt your current projects that you're working on.
Right.
Being involuntarily separated from a company is not fun. Or when you transition from one position to another, one company to another, it may seem exciting, but there's still a learning curve there. Have you established project management mindset to prepare you for that integration or reintegration into that environment, whether it's, you know, military to civilian, civilian to military, you know, one organization to another? There is a process, there is a learning curve that you go through in those environments, and you should have a plan for that project. How am I going to transition? You know, what does that look like? What do I need to do? Are there any projects I need to close out? Was I not given
Right.
a choice?
Yeah.
So that gets into your career planning. You know, did you establish a project management mindset to have your resume updated? You know, are your interviewing skills where they need to be just in case?
Right.
And you know, we've talked about that a lot, but it is important, especially in the industrial climate that we're in right now. Things are somewhat volatile still.
Right. Well, like you said, Dave, we've touched on this many times before because it is so important. Me and you both being in that situation where we were, tapped on the shoulder and said, "Hey, we're going a different direction," and that's one of the things that I talk to people, even if they've been at an organization for a lot of years, happy with where they are. They still should have some type of contingency plan just in case. Not to again to be all doom and gloom is going to happen, it's going to happen, but rather just being prepared. You said that earlier before, being prepared for the unknown. And I know you can't prepare for all scenarios, but you can at least kind of have a draft, something drafted up that if this happens tomorrow, if the company changes hands, if they downsize, where do I fit, or how can I continue? How can I transition to the next thing? So that's like I say, it's not that you hope that that happens, but you want to be in a position to maximize it to the best that you can. Because if you're in a situation where they downsize and 100 people or 200 people are let go, then what do you do? What do you all do? You all have the same skill set. You go out there and compete. Who's gonna move on because they were prepared, or who's gonna scramble at the last minute to try and put things together? So that's what we, hopefully with having a project management mindset, you also do that as in preparation for the unknown.
Yeah, that's that contingency planning, and the military was great with checklists,
Right.
for different scenarios. And that's really what it's about. Each one of those checklists is a project that needs to be managed to make sure that the scenario works out the best way possible. And if that situation doesn't work out, what are a couple of the sub options that come out of that with those checklists? Those are other projects that need to be figured out. That's what we're talking about, is that mindset of not just going with the flow and just
Right.
stagnating in your career or personal life or with your job search or your career preparation.
Right.
It's being deliberate. We've talked about this before. That's one of the things that you love to talk about, is being deliberate about what you're doing, deliberate about your actions, deliberate about your plans, deliberate about your projects that you're working on.
Right.
Adopting that project management mindset establishes a criterion for how to deal with and how to prepare and how to accomplish your goals or certain scenarios or certain environments.
Right. Well, and like we said many times before too, it's not to always expect the worst, but you do want to put yourself in a position that, and we just had a podcast here, a couple of episodes ago about prepared, being prepared for, maybe the worst day of your life. Nobody wants to do that, which, we're in the same boat as well. But we also have to really consider that things happen. And so just having that mindset of, am I prepared for what's next, or something that comes along that I'm not, that just came from out of nowhere, and not being prepared at all. So that's what we're saying by having this project management mindset, is just getting yourself ready, and also to ensure that you're going to have the best chance of achieving your goals, being successful in whatever that project is that you're working on, whether it's personal, professional, or career. It's just being in a better position to making sure you achieve those goals.
So, Joe, what's an example that you can give of how you've used a project management mindset, either in your career, personal life, or professional life?
Well, even just if we want to think about personal life, just in recent years, me and the wife have really decided to travel a little bit more, and so we've taken it a step further as to, okay, start to identify locations where we want to go. Think about the time of the year we want to go. Think about, so are we going to visit people, or are there sites we want to go see? So that's just a small example of how you can use project management to make sure you get the, because you also have to look at, okay, what's the best time for purchasing tickets? Do I need a rental car? I mean, so just those types of things you start to, and me and the wife do, we create a spreadsheet of all those particular things, down to how much it's going to cost. We kind of factor in, okay, we plan on eating meals these times. So when we walk away, we kind of know what we're going to spend, and then when we get there, even if we go over a little bit, at least we have an idea. We don't come back and say, "Well, how much did we spend? 3,500?" So that's just an example of a project management that has helped us. And now in the past couple of years, we've traveled quite a bit because we've had that plan in place. We've done the research and all those types of things. And most people might be saying, well, we do that anyway. And so there you go. That's that project management mindset that you're making sure you don't have these things that are coming out of left field that you weren't expecting. And it also helps you, you're not going to the airport and say, oh crap, I forgot to call and make reservations. You're trying to make it while you're on your way to the destination. So, that's why it's important, again, even if you're traveling, to have some type of project in place, checklist that you can make sure you take care of all those little things.
Yeah, I can definitely identify with that. Some people are more spontaneous,
Yeah,
and that is a
that's true.
form of
Yeah,
project management mindset, is the spontaneity. That's what they're comfortable with. So what does that look like? I'm not too sure. That might be a good conversation to have with someone who's very spontaneous, because
right,
that's not me. I like to, like you, lay things out and have a plan, um, and understand what I'm working towards, and making sure I'm getting everything included into that project, whether
right,
it's a vacation, whether it's setting myself up for a promotion, whether it's setting myself up to start my own business, to
right,
collaborate with someone, whether it's to hone my interviewing skills. A lot of people haven't touched their resume
right,
and a long, they got the job, now they've been there 8 years, and now they have to go back and think about, what have I accomplished that I can put in here to show that I'm qualified and a really good fit for this position or this promotion or this opportunity. So a lot of things we take for granted, and having that project management mindset helps bring those things more to the front of what's
right,
important and what needs to be done. And we've talked a lot about vacation and jobs, promotion and preparing for. What about just like maintenance on your vehicle? What
right.
about,
Yeah,
the the project management mindset of making your budget and sticking to it or
right.
close to it?
Yeah,
That's all part of that project management mindset. Instead of, getting a notice in the mail or email saying, hey, you're overdrafted by X amount and we're about ready to shut your utilities off. Being
right,
present, we've talked about that. So project management mindset is a deliberate forward thinking and planning attitude that we have.
right.
We got about 2 minutes left.
Well, I'll just end it with this again. You touched on how that mindset helps you in different scenarios, and it's universal across the board. Once you kind of master those skills, then you can apply it to most things in your life. It may have started out as your career advancement. You may think, I got to do all these things to get to that next level, but then you can also translate that to, or transfer those skills to personal level, where, like I just talked about, a vacation, or you're going to go back to school, or then in your professional setting where you want to get a certification. And so having that mindset of, okay, what do I need to do? Like we say, you start with that research, find out, is it needed in my job? I mean, just those types of things that kind of get you in that mindset of, I want to be prepared. I want to achieve this goal. I want to do the best I can. So let me write down all these things necessary to do it. So I'll end it with that. Like I say, we go on and go off on different tangents in respect to project management. But again, most of us are probably doing it, but we're doing it,
Exactly.
based on our own, with our mind, just thinking of those steps. Just we would just suggest or recommend that you write it down, just so again you can have that physical checkbox and not just mental checkbox. So
Yeah, and my final thoughts before we close out are, like you said, Joe, you took the word, you're reading my mind again. We're already doing this, we just don't realize it, but that
Right. Yeah.
deliberateness, whether it's a formal certification or just understanding the process. And you can, viewers and listeners, you can research project management on online and see how it breaks down. In the organization, it's very formalized, very deliberate. You can do the same thing with yourself. Not You don't necessarily have to get a certification to do it for yourself, but there are just different techniques that you can use and different steps that you can identify
Right.
with to make things a little bit more streamlined.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Dave, and thanks for the conversation. Like I said, we've been having this conversation more and more, in recent weeks, last month, probably. But I say it's a necessity, tool that you can always reach into your toolbox and utilize. So, again, thanks for tuning into this podcast, this episode. We again want to continue assisting you with your journey. And again, as always, if you have topics you'd like us to talk about or discuss, or if there's information you want more about any of the episodes that we put out there, just feel free to reach out to us. Our information is always in the description, and we would love to hear from you. So, again, if this was your first time, hopefully we're able to take something from this. And if you've been here for a while, thanks again for tuning in. So, with that, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.